Great. Today we have alums Sara Radin, Eric Benson, and Colleen Clark. I want to give a special shout out to Sara Radin, who is one of the founders of Career Bootcamp. And without Sarah, we would actually not be doing what we're doing this evening. So, yay,
I'm sure
Sarah.
you would have figured it out.
Um, Thank you for taking the time, all of you, for speaking with us this evening. Students, we will have time at the end for questions, but please feel free to drop any questions that you may have into the chat, even while the panel is going on. And with that, panelists, I'd love to get started by having you tell us a bit about who you are and what you're currently doing. And Colleen, I would love to start with you.
Hi, everyone. Wonderful to meet you. I'm Colleen Clark. I use she, her pronouns. I am currently a senior design strategist for an organization called Partners in Health. I graduated from the MDes program at Stance in 2020, so the peak of the pandemic. If you want to know about navigating the job market in a pandemic, I have ample insights for you. But I eventually landed at Partners in Health, which is a social justice global health organization. It's been around for about 4 decades. They have their roots in Haiti, and normally they do work like combating Ebola in places like Sierra Leone and Liberia and Africa. But their headquarters are in Boston. So when COVID broke out, they were asked by the state of Massachusetts to help out with this COVID response and what the heck was going on. And then we just popped up sites all over the country, and now we have an official Partners in Health US space. And so I can talk a little bit more about my day-to-day a little bit later on, but the heart of it is working to ensure equity-focused COVID-19 response and helping to redesign our public health infrastructure.
And what drew you to the MDes degree?
So I actually started my career in genomics, genetics and genomics research, and I fell into design through healthcare. And I was preparing to go to medical school, and was really frustrated by the system. I was working in community mental health and then pediatric outpatient specialty contexts, and hit a pause, realized I didn't want to do direct patient care, and then discovered this thing, design, that was not just visual communication, which is super important, but also encompassed all these other areas like UX and service and system design. And so what drew me to the MDes at Michigan at Stance was the focus on social justice and the emphasis on a multidisciplinary approach. The fact that I took classes in Stance, but I also had to take classes elsewhere in the university. And so I really, really loved that focus and that embracing of my multidisciplinary background, but then also that I got to learn from others in a very close collaboration type setting.
That's amazing. Thank you. Thank you. And Eric, tell us a bit about you and what you're currently doing.
Sure. Thanks, John. Nice to see everyone. My name is Eric Benson. I went to the University of Michigan undergrad, got my BFA I graduated in 1998. I spent 5 years at Michigan, changed my major about 7 times. And then like Colleen found design at some point. And it took a little extra time in college. And I pretty much thought like that was it. I'm done with college. But currently I'm a college professor. So that was a strange career path for me, being an introvert, not wanting to be in front of a lot of people. And I do that every day. But prior to being a professor, I worked for about 8 years doing a lot of user interface work and print design work, which got me interested really in what I do now as an educator. As I teach about sustainable design, I'm very interested in minimizing our environmental impact, but increasing our positive social impact on people. I believe in life-centered design as opposed to human-centered design. And what else? I run a nonprofit called Nourish. I'll put it in the chat there. And I'm also a paper maker and a podcaster. So I wear many hats, but the Michigan education definitely helped me get to where I am for sure. And happy to talk about all my strange journeys to where I am today on this panel. Thanks for inviting me.
Yeah, we definitely have to revisit life-centered design. I can't wait to hear more about that. Speaking of which, Sara, tell us a bit about you and what you're doing.
Hi everyone, it's so good to meet you. I work at Instagram. I just started about 3 weeks ago, and I am on the consumer communications team. And I focus on trend research, storytelling around trends, and also reels, which is in the platform, and creators. And my background's in journalism. I have an interesting background. I haven't done any of the same thing the whole time, but I was in fashion, and then I was in but basically the thread throughout my career is that I've always just been interested in what are people starting to talk about, what are niche communities of culture doing, and how can we talk about it? How can we communicate that? Whether that's through storytelling or through fashion. That's been a thread in my work. And I went to the University of Michigan for undergrad. I did the BA in art and design. I was the first year they offered the BA, I believe, and I graduated in 2011.
Very cool. Thank you. Um, so when I think of unexpected career paths, I actually think of my own multiple careers. Um, and one of the things that I know that I learned along the way was, you know, taking advantage of what comes along. And that's pretty unpredictable, but being open to the idea of what comes along. So, Eric, I'd love to start with you on this one. Can you tell us a bit more about your own sort of career paths and, taking advantage of what comes along?
Sure. Yeah, sure. Yeah, like I said, I graduated a while ago. I guess I'm old, I suppose. But I went along, you guys are lucky at Michigan when back in the day, like there was not a lot of career services like you have now. So I just kind of left the building and then found my way into the world of design and professional design through a couple local jobs. And I eventually ended up in Boston working for a company called Razorfish, and then down to Texas Instruments in Dallas, Texas. And it was when I was in Texas, um, things started to come together about, as you described, this kind of crazy career path. But I had gone away from a lot of the print work into the user interface work because I was somewhat embarrassed and upset about, the deforestation issues that come with our overconsumption of a lot of different resources and specifically paper. And so I just said, okay, well, I'll just go digital and then I'll solve that problem until I realized, wow, server farms can take up to the same amount of energy as a small town. And the greenhouse gas emissions from that are humongous. And that was like around 2003, I think, when I was working at Texas Instruments, and I went to a design conference up in Vancouver, which is put on by Terry Irwin, who is at Carnegie Mellon, and that changed my life. I pretty much quit my job a couple months later, and I went to grad school because I didn't know what to do with what I learned. Some things you just can't unsee, and that was it for me. Like I learned so much at that conference about the idea of sustainability, climate change, and all that. So I just basically said, my new goal in life after that was to be using what I have and the skills that I have to be a catalyst for change, but also someone who's helping to fight the climate crisis. And so that's been my life ever since. And I felt like I can reach more people being an educator. And so the terminal degree in design is a master's degree, well, MFA or MDes. And so I said, I can reach more people through teaching. and I had no idea how to teach. In fact, it probably took me like 4 years to figure it out, but luckily I can kind of do it now. But it was definitely a huge shift from just sitting behind a computer all day to actually interacting with people, and in this case students, and teaching them and them teaching me. It's been 15 years now since I started teaching, and so a lot of other stories involved in that, but that's kind of like the weird career path. But at some point gave a bunch of lectures about paper and sustainability, and the argument was like you need to have non-tree fiber papers, and so harder to get, harder, more expensive. So I decided I was going to start making them. So I have a paper making lab here at the university called Fresh Press Paper, and we're making paper out of hemp, agricultural products, byproducts like corn stover and rye and prairie grass. So it's from an environmental standpoint, right now they're like 66% smaller environmental footprint than tree fiber paper. The only reason why they're not, more is that I don't have solar on my studio. If I did, it would pretty much be like a net zero impact.
So
Which
this
is
is the University of Illinois.
yeah,
Um,
yeah.
and I'm wondering, how does that dovetail with Nourish? Is it all sort of together, or are they slightly separate?
No, they're separate. Nourish was my graduate, as Colleen went to grad school, she knows like you had to develop a thesis and all that. So Nourish was my thesis. And at the time, there was really not a lot out there for graphic designers on environmental sustainability, except it was just all over the place. And I curated it and added my own research into it. And then I partnered up with a woman in Boston, and we created it as a 501c3 nonprofit. It's separate from the university, but there's like obvious overlaps with what I do. But it's separate. I have to have my own computer. I can't use the university's computer to do Nourish work on, weird state laws like that. But it's a separate entity, and it's an educational open source tool for designers.
Yeah. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Sarah, I'm very fortunate that I have known you for 10 years, and even more fortunate to stay in touch with you through most of that time. So I have some knowledge of how you have taken advantage of what comes along. I would love it if you could share some of the examples in your life of, your own decision making and being open to what comes along.
This is a hard question. You hit a hard one. Being open to what comes along. I think also what goes hand in hand in that is going after what you want. And I think those two things were things I learned at the University of Michigan for myself. Was that it was such a big campus that I had to go after things, but I also had to be open to things. In terms of, I think this is a hard question. I don't even know how to answer. But I will say there's something to the power of putting yourself out there and being open to that. For example, my most recent position, I interviewed through a friend on a different team about 6 months before this role opened up. And after I interviewed on that team, then I was hired by another team to do freelance. And I edited a magazine that they were doing at Instagram. And after that, I mentioned to the contact I had that I was looking for a full-time position because I was freelancing at that time. And she was like, oh, I think we have things opening up, like stay in touch. And so eventually that led to like me interviewing and me getting this role. And because I expressed interest, they kind of shaped the role around my passions and skills. And so I think that just goes to show that you never know like who's listening and who's in your corner, and what that could lead to. Yeah.
There's uh, there's one sort of interesting example I would love if you could talk about if you feel comfortable, and that was an article that came out in the New York Times about some work that you were doing with women. Um, and I loved this article, and I loved this bringing together of these women. Could you talk a little bit about that experience?
Yeah, so I've lived in New York for 10 years, and about when I was 25, I felt like I really wasn't getting feeling like a sense of community. And so I wanted to start like building community for myself. So I started hosting different types of events, whether that was like art pop-ups at like boutiques or um, different types of like parties or things like that. There was always a creative, artistic spin, whether that was like the denim disco or like, something silly. And so I wanted to do an event for World Menstrual Hygiene Day. And I ended up hosting a storytelling event where about 20 people who menstruate got an opportunity to share poetry or writing and they stood up and performed, and it was really like one of the best nights of my life because it was just so human, I would say. And it was just for fun. It was not for work or anything like that, but I got some period brands involved, and we were able to give out period packs for people to take home. And then we also donated to a local nonprofit that provides period products for homeless people. And yeah, the space where I had the event happened to be next door to this woman that I had established a relationship with, who's a climate justice activist. And she happened to know someone at the New York Times. And I was like, could you send this to the person? And it happened to be that that person was actually interested in what I was doing, which is really kind of crazy. And awesome enough, she came to the event, she wrote a story about it, and it was in the New York Times, and it was called That Time of the Month Can Be Fun Too. And I'm happy to like share it if you want to, John, if you want to share it with people after.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
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 So yeah, that was a really cool experience, and I think people who came and people who performed really enjoyed the sense of community and this, this topic that's typically not talked about or is talked about in like a serious light. There got to be this like lightheartedness about it, but also there was people who performed who hit a bit more serious notes. But yeah, I'm just rambling now. Thank you
But
for asking me about it.
no, because this is one of those things that I think when you're in school, you you don't imagine that somebody could just decide to have a period party. It's unexpected. So I personally love this example. I know that there are others, just because I've stayed in touch with you, but I personally just love this one, and I can definitely share the article from the Times with people later.
Yeah.
So thank you. And then Colleen, certainly, last but not least, tell us a bit about, some of your own experiences around, something that just kind of comes along and you're like, aha, I should do that.
Yeah. First of all, that's so amazing, Sarah. I'm already like super inspired by Eric and Sarah. I just want to sit here and just like pretend I'm like back in school again.
Thank you.
Yeah, one perfect concrete example in the entirety of my 20s was an exercise in this question, John. But one thing in particular is when I decided, so I did genetics and genomics research for a few years, health disparities, decided to that I wanted to become a physician, researcher, and then did all that work, was taking the MCAT, had this like realization of like, oh shoot, I don't want to do this. Was running a small business and was just reflecting a lot on what I wanted to do and where I felt I could contribute whatever skill set. I was still trying to figure out what that was exactly. I was just interested in a lot of things, but I didn't know what kind of impact that could come together to be. And I just stumbled across a Medium article written by a woman named Katie McCurdy, who is a UX researcher and designer in the healthcare space. Turns out she lived in the same town in Vermont where I was living at the time, reached out to her, was like, this article on your website just opened up this whole new world of design and gave me a vocabulary that I didn't even know I was missing. And it was how my brain was working. I just didn't know it. And we met up for tea, and then she introduced me to a colleague and asked him if he would take on an intern. He was newly hired as an experienced designer at the hospital system, the local hospital system. And then that turned into an internship to a full-time thing. And then I had my own projects. And then I said, yes, this is what I do when I grow up, and ran off to Michigan. So yeah, I think just to echo what's already been said, it's like a combination, I think, of just, following your interests, but then also the importance of relationship building as well. Like I wouldn't be in my current job if there wasn't a pandemic. I mean, before this job, I was actually at the University of Illinois, Chicago, all remotely, and didn't think I would end up in public sector working for a nonprofit. I thought I was going to teach design to med students. That was like my career goal. But just happened to meet somebody who thought I could be useful in this other context, and similar to Sarah, they kind of crafted a role for me, and it's been amazing. It's been incredibly challenging. But really, I've learned so much that if you'd asked me a year ago, I'd be like, no, there's no way an organization like that would be interested in hiring me. So.
Yeah, I love this. One of the things that I tell undergraduate students who are, basically around 20 years old, is that they're in a generation where they could definitely live to be 100, which means they have 80 more years on the planet to accomplish all kinds of things. But career changing can be a little daunting. It can be a little scary for people. What advice do you have, even for, the undergrads who are with us today, around navigating career change? And anybody who wants to jump in on this, just please feel free.
Well, okay. I'll start real quick. It's easier when you're younger. So, if you're going to take that leap of faith, go for it at your age now, or even throughout your 20s and all that. I made my career shift when I was 30, and it wasn't that bad because I didn't have any, I didn't have a house or anything like that. So it wasn't so bad. But I mean, you're going to land somewhere, and you might as well take the leap, and I think the key is that the career change thing is, when I did it, it was because of out of passion, I wasn't happy working in corporate America. It's not for me. It might be for somebody else. That's cool. It just wasn't for me. So why would I waste my time in a job like that when there's so much more opportunity out there, so just don't get stuck, really. And yeah, there's a friend of mine, he talked to my students a while ago. He had really great advice, which was, his name is John Bielenberg, and he runs Project M. It's a great project. But he was saying, your first job out of school is really, really important as a stepping stone to something else. And his advice was don't get stuck there.
Yeah.
Because your first job should never be your last job. And so I remember him saying something like his first job was working at a newspaper, and it was soul sucking, and he was designing the same print ad over and over. And it was good money though, but in the end he said, I couldn't stay there. I had to get out, and so I felt the same way when I was working. And so I got out and I went to grad school not at Michigan. I went to another university for that, but went to University of Texas. But it got me to where I am today. And so I don't know if I have any great advice there. It's just, just follow what you want to do. Like Colleen said, you gotta, you know what you want to be when you grow up, you got to go do it.
Or at least what you want to be for now. Some of us never grow up. Sara or Colleen, either one, jump in.
Yeah. I mean, I think just knowing that nobody really knows what they're doing is really important lesson, and I'm still learning it and learning to embrace that for myself. That, I mean, some people know what they're doing, but like a lot of us are just figuring it out as we go. And the sooner you realize that, the easier your career will be to manage expectations of yourself and of your career. I think it'll make it easier. So did I answer the question?
You did. I think just the knowledge that most of us are making it up as we go along is really important for people to know. So I absolutely love that. And Colleen, any thoughts around career changing?
Yeah, I think, sometimes career changing a lot of times is a privilege, right? If you're in a job, you have to stay there for various reasons. But I'd say, well, one, like I worked 3 jobs for 12 years in order to kind of follow what I wanted to do. So there's that. So if you want to be committed, it may require like little sleep and, working late at a restaurant and getting up and doing the thing you really want to do. I think another is before taking that leap, like my pivot was very incremental and was built on conversation by conversation. Like you won't know until you talk to somebody and then you talk to somebody else. And like a lot of people I was very surprised as I entered the design world. People were so eager to get other people passionate about these different topics. And so within design, so that was something that I wasn't expecting, that I found very reassuring. So conversations, and also figure out if there's ways for you to, shadow or learn or support for free, or, do that stuff that you probably do in your summers or, in independent studies, but kind of taking that same approach, but to a career. And also, I don't know, I like to think of a whole life versus a career, right? Like, there's, I think more and more now, I think of I'm building in other things around my, career. But my job is an important part of my identity, but it's just one part, and everything kind of just informs each other, if that makes any sense. Kind of like Eric's like life-centered approach.
Yeah, you just put your finger on something that I think is key for all of us to remember. That there's a difference between a job and a career. And obviously jobs make up careers, but there are jobs we do just to keep a roof over our head versus things that we do that we have purpose and passion for. And I think you're really putting your finger on something important around the idea of privilege. Not everybody can, in fact, pursue their passions and their purpose, and decision making is more than one thing or another. So I love all of your responses and how you're putting just sort of some really great information out there around the realities. Over the last month, according to the Bureau of Labor Statistics, over 4% of Americans quit their jobs. And we don't know, did they quit their jobs because they had something lined up? Did they quit their jobs because they were fed up? We don't have those stats or that data yet, but certainly something is happening in our culture right now that I think people are, in fact, evaluating and reevaluating what they're doing and what's important to them. And all of you are living examples of how, over time, your interests can change, your passions can change, your values can actually change. And so I would love for students tonight to just kind of absorb that, change is okay. You can start out doing something and decide later, I don't really like this. That is totally okay. Um, so one of the things that we know is the most important things that we learn in life are not in a classroom. They're actually outside of a classroom. And if you can think back to when you were a student, what were the experiences outside of a classroom that actually maybe has the most value and the most resonance for you now? Um, and, again, any one of you who has, some thoughts about that, feel free to just jump right in.
I think this might be a little bit of a cop out because it was like in the studio, but also outside the studio. So the way the MDes is structured, at least it was when I was there. I know it may have made some changes since I graduated in 2020, but you have 4 other people or 4 to 6, a small group of people that you work very closely for 2 years. And that basically becomes your social and your academic, and it becomes your whole, for some people, their whole community, because it is so consuming, as Eric kind of pointed to with like your thesis and everything else. And our studios are so like physically isolated as well. So you're not even having like, run-ins with anybody else. So that really taught me how to work through things with all kinds of people. So how to really collaborate, how to get along, communicate, how to move through challenges of all kinds, communication, schedules, you name it, life stuff happening. It was not pretty. You'll talk to a lot of people in the MDes program who graduated. They're like, I never want to talk to my classmates ever again. They're all lovely people. I spend way too much time with them, and there's some bridges that have been burned. But I think about that a lot and how that really taught me, especially now having to pivot to remote collaboration, and how I think I learned so much in the moments that I think I was probably my lowest and drove me nuts. So now looking back, I can see those as learning moments. But at the moment, I was like, what? All you people are driving me crazy. I'm driving myself crazy. I haven't slept. I don't know what's going on. Am I going to get a job? Like there's some virus that apparently is out, halfway around the world that may come and take us over. Like there were so many moments of uncertainty, but it was those moments that now looking back, I think I probably learned the most than any like deliverable or capstone or project did.
Yeah, that's a great example. And we have to go to Eric because his cat almost made an appearance. There we go. Thank you for sharing
Yeah.
the screen with the cat. It's a rule now for me that if any cat appears on screen, we must say hi to the cat.
Yeah.
So thank you. Um, Eric, do you have any sort of example of what you learned
Yeah.
outside of a class, experientially, that has really stayed with you or resonated with you?
Yeah, for sure. I think like many college students, not a lot of money. So I was working 2 jobs and then I'd go to the studio. That was pretty much my life. And so those 2 jobs were extremely different. I worked at doing photocopies, and then I worked at a library, the medical library, in their special reserve section where no one came to, so I could sleep a lot. But there was a lot of work that I had to do. And I think the lesson learned was just like how, what the world is like post college. It's not maybe what you think it is, or maybe it is. And so it taught me a lot of good lessons, but also the most important one was just the network. So the 2 bosses I had, I was like really close with them, and I still talk to one of them today. That was a while ago. I still talk to her. But at the time, I graduated, and the first job I got laid off after like 3 months, and I had no clue what I was going to do. But I was able to reach back out to the people I used to work for and, ask for advice and like, hey, I literally have no money. What what do I do? And he was super nice and he brought me back and he was trying to help me build a career at his making photocopies, and that wasn't really what I wanted my career to be, but he was super nice. But the whole thing that I learned was just about the network. um, I really wish I would have kept in touch with more of the people I went to school with, because like later on in life I see them on LinkedIn. I'm like, oh my god, that guy was like the third person hired at DreamWorks. And I was like, damn. And he worked on all the Shrek movies. I should have kept up with him. And then one of the other women like went on to run IDEO.org, and I was like, shoot, that could have helped me out in my getting jobs when I was laid off. If I would have kept in
Was
touch.
that Patrice by any chance?
It is Patrice.
Oh yeah, she's lovely. Yeah.
Yeah. So I remember Patrice and we talk all the time, but then we graduated and that was it. But that was before social media where you could look people up and everything. But I guess I wish I would have built a stronger network, and now I do. But I mean, back then it would have helped me a lot more when I've been laid off multiple times. And so that network is like super important to build you back up again. And I wish I would have known that earlier. But anyways, that's an aside.
But that's a really central piece to career development and something that I definitely emphasize with students is your peers, the people that you are going to school with right now. They are forming your network. Get to know each other, stay in touch with each other. So I love that you brought this up. That's perfect. And then Sarah, thoughts about what you did outside of class that was helpful and that you kind of still value now.
I think I had the opportunity to intern, and that was really helpful to me. So I, my mom's coworker's wife worked at Ralph Lauren when I was in college, and she told me I could intern for her. And she was doing something not that I didn't find very creative at the time. She was doing production. And so she worked with like the factories overseas to make sure that the garments were made as the designers designed them. And while I was interning for her, even though I was not really interested in what she was doing, which is interesting, I learned more about other departments and sat in on meetings and was able to find an area of the company that I was interested in, which was called concept design. And so there was this woman who was working under the creative director of the clothing line who would help tell stories about the collection and help figure out what the inspiration for each season would be. And I found out about what she does through sitting in on meetings. And then I approached her with my boss's blessing and asked if I could shadow her more. And so that was really like a defining moment for my career, because I ended up deciding that I wanted to do that thing. And so I was like, okay, now I know I want to work in fashion. And so when I graduated, I interned at Coach in handbag design, and then I got a job at Converse as a concept designer. So I was ultimately able to get a job doing what I discovered in an internship that I wasn't that interested in. So I think, that was my experience. It definitely shaped my career, and I'm really grateful that I had that opportunity. It was an unpaid internship, so it was really hard. I had to like work on the side, and but yeah.
Yeah, and definitely, I love this idea of until you experience something, you just don't know. And it's being in the world to quote unquote be in the right place at the right time. Because you have to be out there. You got to show up. or you're not going to learn these types of things. So this is great. Thank you guys so much. So students, we're going to come up on some Q&A time very soon here. So if you have questions for any of the panelists, please do put them into the chat. What I'd love to hear from you now, and this is a question that I pretty much ask all alums who participate in all these panels. Is there something that you either wish you had known or that you wish someone had told you when you were still a student? And, you know, if any of you have something right off the bat, feel free to jump in.
I'll go.
Go ahead.
These are the best years of your life. So appreciate it and make the most of it while you can and while you're not a part of the capitalistic structure.
So that student bubble before you have to take on lots of responsibility. Okay.
I mean, I worked in college, so like I did work, but things change when you graduate. They change dramatically, and you're never going to get these years back. So just make the most of them and don't be so hard on yourself to have all the answers.
Yeah, I love that. Don't be so hard on yourself. That's great. Thank you. Colleen or Eric, something that you wish you had known or you wish someone had told you?
Now I was, because Sarah and Eric are reflecting on undergrad years. So I'm like toggling between undergrad, which I went to University of Virginia, not Michigan, but I know I'm here representing my grad years, which feel like also super far away, even though it was
but
over a year ago.
You can respond to either experience. It's pretty universal.
Yeah, it's true. I think what I thought of is true for both times of my life, is the importance of figuring out your intrinsic versus extrinsic motivation. I had an advisor who really pushed me on that in grad school, even though it like drove me nuts, but it's something that I wish I had paid attention to more. So by that, I mean, what am I drawn to because I feel like I should be drawn to? What will get me affirmation from society, from capitalism, like Sarah said, versus what's actually something that brings me joy and meaning and fulfillment and that I'm doing because it's aligned with my values. And sometimes those things will overlap and sometimes they won't. And I think once feeling more comfortable with my own intrinsic motivations kind of helps quiet any noise, any anxiety of like what I should be doing, having it figured out. Because I completely agree with Sarah, like no one has it figured out. Now that I've been inside like major city governments and had way too much inside look into the fiasco of the last like year and a half, like no one knows. No one knows. I mean, no one knew before the pandemic. No one knows now. No one's going to know. So like really, no, like it just, no one knows. So never like, you know, undersell yourself or think you can't apply or go or do something because like John said, you can, it's worth experiencing it.
That is so great. And you put your finger on something I'm very repetitive about, which is purpose and passion. And when purpose and passion can overlap, that's a moment to pay attention to and to be available for, to be on the lookout for. So I love you guys. This is great. Eric, can you tell us anything you wish you had known or you wish someone had told you?
Well, I agree with Sarah. Like, geez, it was amazing being a student here at Michigan. I guess that's why I'm back in college, I guess, because I can live it through my students again, I suppose, but not quite. I guess, I think it would be that I wish I would have known some of the stuff that, it was that song, right? I wish I knew then what I know now when I was younger, It's a good song. It's in the Rushmore movie soundtrack if you like Wes Anderson, but I really wish I would have known some of the stuff about what I do now. Like if I would have been taught that in school, about, social impact work, and because it was very like corporate, type stuff they were talking about in school, which got me to where I am. But I really wish I would have known more about this. Maybe I could have started it earlier. I don't know. I mean, I don't really regret anything about it. It's just, some of the stuff here comes my cat again. I wish I
Hi.
would have known a little bit more about that, I guess, because yeah, I don't know. I don't have a great answer.
No, you're doing fine. So I'm just checking the chat. I don't see any questions. Oh, here we go from Ty. Have you had imposter syndrome? Oh, yeah. Especially as an artist designer. And do you have any suggestions to face it and believe in yourself in the process? This is a great question, Ty. Anyone who wants to take a crack at it, go for it.
Oh, I
Um,
have.
yeah, me too. I still deal with imposter syndrome, but therapy helps a lot.
In addition to therapy helping, what other suggestions do you have in being able to either overcome it or to believe more in yourself?
It's a hard one.
Yeah, it is.
I think it also comes with age, and experience. And the more you put yourself out there, the more experience you get, and you come to realize that like everybody's figuring it out, like I said earlier, and you're not behind, as much as you might feel like you are. I don't know. I think it's a universal experience, and maybe knowing that might help you feel like you're not the only one experiencing imposter syndrome.
Yeah, yeah. Eric, what thoughts do you have about how to address it, how to, um,
Yeah.
you know,
Well, well, I definitely had it as like being a professor, because I guess as a student, I always like had no clue what professors were. And when I'd see them like around town, I was shocked. Like they had, like, I thought they just lived in the building, and then they'd come down for class or something. So being in that role, like as a professor, I was always like, I don't know what I'm doing here. This is kind of, I can't believe it. And, furthermore, like I was, when I started doing this, I was younger. I was like 30, and I was confused for a student quite often. So that didn't make me feel any better about this imposter syndrome. Made me feel good about, hey, maybe I look okay or something. I don't know, but um, I guess like I think with coming with age, right? Like that does help, and realizing that everyone's kind of all in their own head anyways all the time, and so you're thinking that they're questioning you when they're really not. They're just thinking about their own insecurities. um Helped me a lot when I kind of realized like, oh, they're not really questioning me. They don't really distrust that I don't know what I'm talking about. It's just that this is just in my own head, and they're in their own head too, thinking people are thinking they're crazy. And it's really like everyone is just kind of worried about the same thing, but it's not actually something to worry about.
wow, that was really good. Colleen, thoughts that you have?
Absolutely. I mean, this is something that still plagues me, to be honest. Like I had a recruiter reach out to me from IDEO actually, and I was like, oh my God, I think they got the wrong email. They don't know, like, what are they? I don't have anything to offer. I'm not even a designer, like I've worked in science, like ran a patent sit business. Like I'm not a real designer. But what I realized that helped me get through it, and still working on it clearly, and shout out to Sara for mentioning therapy, is that two things. One, reflecting back to something hard that I've done, something I didn't think I could do and then did. So it can be as simple as like, I don't know, maybe you learned how to drive, or maybe you took on some project, even like read a book and finish it that you didn't think you finish, like pointing back to something you didn't think you could do and did it. And like, okay, I can do hard things, or I can prove myself wrong. And another one is that I realized having imposter syndrome was not serving me. It was fueling a lot of insecurities that didn't that led me to not put my best foot forward. And that actually got me a lot in trouble in grad school, because I constantly felt like I had to prove myself in all these different ways. And it was like not actually making me be the best teammate or bringing forth my best effort, my best work. It just really dominated and I deprived myself of being able to actually make a meaningful contribution to whatever space I was in.
Yeah, and thank you, Eric, running a marathon just to be able to say you could do it. This is great. And I want to go back to the sort of almost universality of imposter syndrome and the the importance of externalization, of being able to talk about it versus Eric pointing out that everybody's in their heads. Get out of your head. Be able to externalize what you're thinking and why you're thinking it. And other people will start saying, oh my gosh, I feel that same way too. And being able to share, just like Sarah was saying, if you just start to say this stuff out loud, other people will, remind you, because sometimes, as much as I would love to say we're all capable of being conscious and reminding ourselves of what we're capable of doing, sometimes we're just not in the right headspace. But if we talk about it with other people, they can remind us as well. Remember that time when, remember how you were able to. So, I love this question. It's so important, I think, for creatives to, you know, find safe spaces and safe people to have these conversations. So thank you so much. Great question. In the few minutes that we have left, we're going to go round robin with parting words. No pressure. No, like, doesn't have to be completely sage, but you know, parting words you would like to give to students around the fact that careers can be unpredictable, and that hopefully in your case and their case as well, can work out just fine. Sarah, let's start with you. Parting words, parting advice.
I would say it's okay to be a work in progress and have your career be a work in progress and not have all the answers. Yeah.
Oh, beautiful. Thank you. Eric, parting words, parting advice.
Sure. Yeah. So you're going to currently a major public university. I hear here it's like ranked number one as a public university in the U.S., which is fantastic. And the opportunities that you have at that University of Michigan to not just take art and design classes and not just stick around the same pool of people, but be influenced by people from all over the world on that campus is an experience that will help shape your career and where you go. I learned a lot about a lot of things. I know I learned a little about a lot of things by just not taking only art and design classes that have helped me throughout my career. I call it conversational currency, like being able to talk to anyone from any walk of life and any field, and being able to empathize and understand them, because that's how you make friends. That's how you make just being a good person, I guess, and people remember that. Just being a good person, people remember that, and you help people out. Eventually, one day they'll scratch your back too. So it comes back to just enjoying your time on campus and just exploring, and it'll lead you somewhere.
Our keynote speaker, Jules Pieri, actually touched on this on Monday. Be a good person, be a good human. I love that you're echoing something we've already heard this week, so thank you, Eric. Colleen, any parting words, any parting advice?
I think be curious. So like Sarah said, she took that internship that she was like, nah. I think, but that led to a lot. So I think if you just lead with some curiosity, or at least willingness to suspend your disbelief or the fact that you don't think you're interested, that will serve you. And yeah, be kind. That was something, Eric, I wholeheartedly like to echo as well.
Be kind. Thank you. Before we close up for tonight, are all of you willing to be in touch with current students? Yeah? And how do you like to be contacted? Because I know people have different preferences.
Email?
Email is great. For anybody who wants to be in touch with Sara, obviously I know her email. Eric, Colleen?
Email or LinkedIn.
Okay. Very good. Very
Yeah.
good. Okay.
LinkedIn is good too.
Yeah, very good. All right. And Colleen, any particular way you like to be in touch?
Yes, I just put my email in the chat, so email and LinkedIn
Oh.
as well. So feel free to share both.
Even better, even better. All right. So obviously I have all of your contact info. Anybody tonight who'd like to follow up with these wonderful alums, Eric, Sara, and Colleen, please feel free either through me or through the contact info that they've put into the chat. And with that, thank you, thank you, thank you. You guys are amazing. Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you, and good luck,
Thank
everyone.
you. Good luck.
Thank you.
Okay. So Shakim is still with us.
Yeah, Shakim, how you doing?
I'm fine. I'm fine. My mouse just died for a second, so I was getting.
Yay! Yay, tech. Shakim, it's great to see you. I'm gonna, unless you had a question, I'm gonna go ahead and close this out, okay?
Oh yeah. Oh
Have a
yeah.
good
Speaking
one.
of which, I have like one final question.
Sure.
Signed up for an event. I think it was like a portfolio expo event on the 12th. I think I forgot when it was, but it was like the first event in the career
Oh,
bootcamp.
October 8th, yeah. Portfolio prep and presentation, yeah.
Yeah. I want to ask, was that like recorded at all or not?
Everything that I'm doing this semester is recorded, and what I need to do is get captioning added onto all the videos, and then I'm going to hopefully release them, if not all at once, at least as many at the same time as I can, so it's not coming out to you guys in drips and drabs.
Okay.
But everything's being recorded.
All right. Thank you.
All right, great to see you, Shakim.
Take
See you.
care. Bye, John.
Take care. You too.
Bye-bye.